Hello and welcome to the Way and the Truth and the Life messages with me, Ashley Moore. I want to welcome you. And if you're just joining us, we are continuing on our small group study titled Faith from the book of Hebrews 11. So today's lesson number 8, we're going to talk about by faith Moses. And so we're going to read verse 23 of Hebrews chapter 11. It says, by faith, Moses, after he was born, was hidden by his parents for 3 months because they saw that the child was beautiful and they didn't fear the king's edict. So let's talk about that real quick. Exodus, if we go to Exodus chapter 1, we will find that the Pharaoh does make an edict. And it says this in Exodus chapter 1, you must throw every son born to the Hebrews into the Nile, but let every daughter live. So Exodus chapter 2 says the woman gave birth to a son, and she did hide him for 3 months. But then after the 3 months, when she couldn't hide him anymore, she put him in a basket and sent him down the river in hopes someone would find him and take care of him. And so we see Moses' mother here, and we see her great faith. It took a lot of faith for a mother to believe that someone was going to find her baby boy. So now let's read verse 24 and 25 of Hebrews 11. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter and chose to suffer with the people of God rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasure of sin. For he considered reproach for the sake of Christ to be greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, since he was looking ahead to the reward. And so now we're going to go back to Exodus chapter 2. And Moses sees his people getting beat up and killed multiple times by the Egyptians. And so Moses one day decides he's going to get really angry, and he kills one Egyptian that he sees beating a fellow Hebrew. And so Moses decided that he wanted to be a part of his people. And then verse 27, 28, and 29, it says, by faith he left Egypt behind, not being afraid of the king's anger, for Moses persevered as one who sees him who is invisible. By faith he instituted the Passover and the sprinkling of the blood, so that the destroyer of the firstborn might not touch the Israelites. By faith they crossed the Red Sea as though they were on dry land. When the Egyptians attempted to do this, they were drowned. So let's go back to Exodus chapter 2. It tells us that Moses ran away to Midian. Okay, he ran away to the desert and he went to Midian. And so he stayed there for about 40 years. 40 years, that's a long time. And so when he returned, he had a calling. He had a promise. He had a purpose. Because when he met God at that burning bush, God told Moses to go to the Pharaoh and declare for him to let his people go. And so Exodus 4 and 5, we see Moses confronting Pharaoh. Exodus chapter 2, God gives the final plague, which is that death would come. into the land and would kill every firstborn male. And so God gives specific directions for the Passover, okay? And then Exodus chapter 14, God leads Moses through the Red Sea. And then God actually led the people, get this, God led them a certain way. But then God told Moses, no, turn around, you're going to go this way. And so the people started going in a different direction. And it was actually ended up being the harder way to go. But God wanted them to trust him, because lots of hard things, lots of challenging things were going to come up. And so God was showing them that they had to trust him for the impossible. And so God opened up the sea. And Exodus 14, verse 13 and 14 says, "But Moses said to the people, 'Don't be afraid, stand firm and see the Lord's salvation that he will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you must be quiet.'" And then going back to Hebrews 11, verse 30 and 31, it says, "By faith, the walls of Jericho fell down after being marched around by the Israelites for 7 days. By faith, Rahab, the prostitute, welcomed the spies in peace and didn't perish with those who disobeyed." So after the people were in the desert for 40 years, Moses raised up Joshua to be their new leader after Moses would be gone. And so Moses told Joshua the promise of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, and now Moses. So that promise had been handed down, and now we see Joshua rising up to the plate. And Joshua chapter 1, it tells us that God says to Joshua, "Be strong and courageous, for you will distribute the land I swore to their fathers to give them as an inheritance." So this, again, God is showing the promise to many generations later. Let me tell you, whatever your great-great-great-grandparents prayed, it's still good for today. Still good for today. Prayers do not expire. And so Joshua chapter 6, Joshua by faith obeyed every direction that was given by God about the walls of Jericho. And so the walls of Jericho came down, and the land God promised, that promise that God proclaimed to Abraham on day one, by faith Abraham, was fulfilled. And so Joshua chapter 2, it talks about the spies that went into Jericho, seeing how bad it really was, because you had all those spies that said, "Oh my goodness, they're as big as the sky, we could never fight them." And it's Caleb and Joshua are the two that say, "Nope, God will just smash them away, no big deal." And so the spies went into Jericho, and they promised Rahab that they would save her and her family because of her kindness of hiding them. And so when Jericho was taken, they did save Rahab and her family. And what's really, really amazing to me is that someone as horrendous of a background as Rahab. You talk about a bad rep, okay? Rahab was known for some things as a prostitute. So what's interesting to me is that when we learn about in the New Testament the genealogy of Jesus himself, Rahab is actually a part of that genealogy. And I think that is so amazing to me. So if you haven't, look it up in Matthew. The genealogy of Jesus is all right there. It's very interesting. So they ended up, saving Rahab and her family. And so God's promises were fulfilled. And so the same God who promised, who conquered, who set free, who protected, and who saved is the same God who does it today. And so let me ask you, what promises has God promised to you? What promises have been given by God to your family? Because God will do what he says he's going to do by faith. Amen.